Grand opening, grand closing. Welcome, my friends, my family, my fellow gamers. It's your only friend, these YouTube streets, PlayStation77, back with another video. And let's talk about PlayStation making a triumphant return to Tokyo Game Show. Recent reporting is PlayStation is fully returning to Tokyo Game Show. Sony hasn't had a major presence at the show since 2019. Sony Interactive Entertainment will attend the largest ever Tokyo Game Show. It has been announced. The trade show will take place in September. We'll see 731 exhibitors and 3,190 booths. The show will take place in the Makuhari Messe in Miyamoku, Chiba City. Holy cow. I'm getting thrashed here, Chiba Prefecture. I apologize if I mispronounce. I am not fluent in Japanese. I truly apologize for that, if I ended up butchering the words. Sony was present at Tokyo Game Show 2023, but only presented independent titles as part of its involvement in the show. Capcom, Konami, and other large Japanese publishers have also been announced as attendees of this year's show. It is currently unclear what Sony plans to exhibit at the show, as its largest currently announced titles, such as Astrobot, will have been released by the time the show takes place. It is expected that 250,000 visitors will attend the show when it takes place from September 22nd until September 29th. The PlayStation maker's attendance was under question following recent news that it has reportedly decided not to attend Gamescom. Sony most recently appeared at Gamescom in 2019, which was the last in-person edition of the show before COVID-19 pandemic. I think that's pretty much the year that Sony cut off all shows, right? I think it was the last year for all of it. E3, Gamescom, Tokyo Game Show. So really 5 years, they've pretty much been out of like the big convention shows. Sony recently said it expects PS5 hardware sales to decline during its current year, which runs into March 2025, and confirmed its plans to release no major existing franchise titles during this 12-month period. It's used as a state of play presentation made to announce launch dates for 2024 release dates, including Concord, Astrobot, and the PC version God of War Ragnarok. So, all right, so we got this. So the question is, and this is the question we got to ask ourselves, all right, what's Sony's planning to do, right? Because if you're going to actually be present at Tokyo Game Show and potentially, let's say, maybe have a showcase, an exhibit or something, not just an exhibit, but actually talk to the community about something, what exactly are you trying to do? A lot of people are thinking this is going to be the presentation of the PlayStation 5 Pro, and it also correlates with the 30-year anniversary of PlayStation. PlayStation launched in Japan in 1994. When it first unveiled. So this is the 30th anniversary. But simply being a 30th anniversary without content and stuff, you know what I mean? I don't know. I'd be like, all right, got it, But this could be potential of PlayStation unveiling the Pro, and they're gonna do it where I guess they unveiled the PlayStation for the first time and whatever in Japan. So I guess, going back to traditions and stuff like that, right? But the question is, what about games, right? Is this where they're gonna finally unveil their first party games, right? Especially the thing is about Tokyo Game Show, a lot of us are expecting, well, if you're gonna do a Tokyo Game Show, is it gonna be very Japanese centric games, RPG stuff like that, which is perfectly fine, right? Because that's part of the DNA of PlayStation. In fact, that's why many Western gamers buy PlayStations, because we enjoy RPGs, we enjoy many of the games from Japanese developers, right? And PlayStation, along with Nintendo, right, have done a phenomenal job of providing those games, right? So we won't have an issue with that. But are they going to unveil some of their first party titles from their own first party studios, which have primarily become Western centric? The Sony, PlayStation have, partnerships with more Japanese developers that we're not aware of, that they're funding projects to create more games and stuff like that. Similar to what Sony's doing with, South Korea, with Shift Up and creating Stellar Blade. They also have the China Hero project, right? That's a good way for PlayStation to expand new game development, create new IPs without necessarily having to acquire developers and studios and just buy out stuff, right? Acquisitions are very expensive, and you spend billions of dollars when you could take a fraction of that money and just go straight into game development. Sure, It could eventually just, the titles can end up being ported to PC because technically the developer is still independent, stuff like that. But that's not a big deal. I mean, at the end of the day, if PlayStation is funding the creation of new IPs, giving smaller developers that normally don't have the funds to do it themselves, and Sony's like, hey, you know, we'll help you, we'll fund you, we'll get the game started, we'll get these titles created, put it on PlayStation, and if, you know, you guys still decide to make a PC, there's no big on that. It's not a big deal for us because at the end of the day, we want new IPs, we want new titles, we want new creative, innovative ideas, and they're not all gonna come from internal first-party studios, right? Sony doesn't have that many first-party studios, right? You're gonna have to expand and reach out to more developers who are willing to work with the brand to create the titles, and we end up benefiting, right? Stellar Blade is a perfect example, right, of that relationship. Rise of Ronin is a good example, right? And that's Tecmo. And we got a, you know, amazing game. In fact, I'm gonna start playing Rise of Ronin this weekend, right? Counter Hero Project, I'm still waiting for Lost Soul Aside. Like, wow, I'm waiting for that game because the game looks phenomenal, right? So we're gonna benefit from a lot of new IPs, new partnerships from the industries and stuff like that. And Sony's willing to invest in that. You don't necessarily have to acquire a huge developer publisher to do it, right? But it's interesting. After 5 years, if Sony plans to do something and make a major presence at Tokyo Game Show, it's got to be something big. It can't just be something simply as, oh, we're here because we're celebrating 30 years of PlayStation. Happy birthday. No, come on now. We got to do something. And I think they might unveil the Pro in September and then immediately start selling it in, you know, this holiday season. But are they going to show us games, right? Because again, the Pro is going to be for a small niche audience. It's not going to be for the general public where you're just going to get this massive wave of sales year after year after year. The majority of PlayStation gamers, they're already focused on their PlayStation 5. And I would say the majority who aren't on PlayStation 5, they're going to get the base PS5. They're going to get it for $350, $400, $450. They're not going to buy the Pro. Not saying that's because it's bad, because they don't really need it. PS5 is more than capable, has done a phenomenal job, and the majority just want games. Like the fever of talking about hardware, T-flops, 52 CUs, and all this RDNA 3.5 and all this weird shit. You move on, right? That's a conversation to start the gen, right? It's an interesting conversation like the first year and the year before it. Maybe a little bit into the second year. But definitely after the second year of the console generation, it's over. Nothing but games. Nothing purely. The majority are truly all about the games. And that's what Sony has to bring in this, in one form or another, right? And now, I'm not going to limit new games and new IP strictly to the first party. If there are PlayStation gamers and that's your barometer, then you're just missing out, right? That's just like this year alone, Sony has provided games through their partnerships, right? You get to play Final Fantasy, 7 Rebirth. You got Rise of Ronin. You got Stellar Blade. They also release Helldivers for the multiplayer guys. And for the multiplayer guys that are begging for more multiplayer, they're about to release Concord. For guys who want those classic RPG, not RPGs, but the classic platformers and stuff like that, you're getting Astrobot, right? And then towards the end of the year, they got partnership to bring Silent Hill 2 Remake onto the platform. So there is a lot of content, a lot of games that you get to play. If you are holding yourself back from playing these games that PlayStation provide, with some of them you can only play on PS5. So the console you chose because you're like, hey, I bought a PS5 because exclusives, because I don't want to miss out on games. That's happening. There are games that if you don't own a PS5, you're missing out on. Now, for those of you that don't have a PS5 and you don't care, that's cool, right? I'm similar with like the Nintendo Switch, right? Some of the best games that people crave, and hey, that's on you guys. You love it, whatever. I'm just not really interested in it, but no loss for me. You're interested in what you're interested, right? But if you do have a PS5 because you felt there's going to be games on there that you don't want to miss out, it's happening, right? If you're a PlayStation dude and you don't like none of these games, then man, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, to each their own, right? But there's titles that's coming out on PlayStation that can only be on PlayStation, at least for the time being. Who knows when the PC version comes out? But why worry about that scenario when you already own the PS5? The PS5 is in your house. You have access to the games right now. So if you're not playing these games, I don't know what to tell you, right? If it's just strictly first party and that's all you're going to play, and you're not concerned about the strategy Sony has with working with partners, working with South Korean devs, working with Chinese devs, working with more Japanese developers, right? To say, hey, we'll fund your project. Let's get those games going. Let's get those games going on PlayStation 5. We'll help you fund and make those games great. We'll give you the technical support. And then they create it. They release it on PS5. And now you have the ability to, to play these new IPs and these new innovative games. And you're just going to shut them out simply because, it's not made by Santa Monica. And I don't know what to tell you. Y'all, it is what it is. Y'all do what you do. You enjoy the hobby the way you want to enjoy it. I'm looking forward to all these new creative titles and IPs that Sony plans to make and help support devs to make. That's why I bought a PlayStation. And it's an amazing thing. It's doing an amazing job. But all eyes is going to be on this Tokyo Game Show. And guess what? Sony put themselves in the spotlight. Because, again, they haven't been at this show for 5 years. They haven't really been on any major show for 5 years. 5 years. So the standards and the metric to, the expectations on them is put on high. Because if you avoided the show for 5 years and everybody's used to the fact that, Sony's not going to go back to Tokyo Game Show. They're not going to go back to E3. Well, E3's dead anyway. That's long and gone. But they're not going to go back to Gamescom. It's pretty much over. They moved on. And then now after 5 years, we're coming back to Tokyo Game Show. What? We're going to be like, if you made that decision, and that's a Sony decision, if PlayStation made that decision, you got to follow through. And that's what I'm going to say. This is your only friend, these YouTube streets, PorterRock77. Let me know what you think about the video. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, all that stuff. See you Tuesday, 60 Frames No Like podcast. I'm out of here. Peace. Grand opening, grand closing.